Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final day of Reunion Reimagined 2021. And you are in for a treat on this last day. My name is Rona Wilk, class of 1991, and I am the chair of the AABC Reunion Committee. We are also joined by Angela Lehman and Julia Luby, class of 2018 from Alumni Relations, who are helping to make this event possible. As a quick reminder, and actually this is, I think, more for webinars, but you'll get the gist that this online event enables an attendee to participate through a personal device's microphone and or camera, and you may elect to not participate through the use of a microphone and or camera. But if you do, this constitutes a release and waiver of rights in the capture of an attendee's image, likeness, and or voice for the exclusive use of Barnard College, although none of you are actually going to be on camera. So, however, we have some very special guests with us today to discuss arts and culture in the age of COVID. Heather White Godfrey, class of 01, Mia Katigbak, class of 1976, Jean Lichty, class of 81, Phanésia Pharel, class of 2021, a new alum, and our moderator, Professor Gabri Christa. So just to introduce our panelists and their amazing accomplishments very quickly. Heather White Godfrey, class of 01, is the co-founder and executive director of Dance Project of Washington Heights, a pay-what-you-can nonprofit dance program with the mission to remove barriers to dance education and build community through dance. She earned a BA in dance from Barnard, and from there she pursued a career in dance and musical theater for nearly 10 years, before teaming up with her friend and former Paul Taylor dancer, Susan Dodge, to found the Dance Project of Washington Heights, to combat inequities that she saw in her Washington Heights neighborhood. DPWH now serves anywhere from 130 to 500 students from Washington Heights, Inwood, and the Bronx, continually finding new and innovative ways to provide children, particularly those from communities of color, low-income families, immigrant communities, as well as students with learning differences, gain access to high-quality dance education. And I think in the context of our conversation, it's important to note that all of those communities have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Jean Lichty, class of 1981, is both an actress and producer, and is the proud founder and executive director of La Femme Productions, an all-inclusive theater company whose mission it is to explore and celebrate the female experience in primarily American works that feature significant roles for women. Since its inception in 2013, La Femme has earned a number of accolades, including a Drama Desk nomination and a listing in the Wall Street Journal's The Best Theater of 2014. Most recently, Jean produced and played Hannah in La Femme's Theater's virtual presentation of The Night of the Iguana, directed by Emily Mann and featuring Dylan McDermott and Felicia Rashad. Off-Broadway, she has produced and played the title roles in A Lovely Sunday for Crèvecoeur, A Loss of Roses, The Traveling Lady, and Nora, the latter two co-productions with the legendary Cherry Lane Theater. After graduating from Barnard with theater honors, she trained with William Esper, Wynn Hanman, and Larry Moss. Mia Katigbak, class of 1976, is the co-founder and actor-manager of the award-winning New York City-based National Asian American Theater Company, or NATCO. She is a USA Fellow and the recipient of TCG's 2017 Fox Foundation Resident Actor Fellow for Distinguished Achievement, as well as too many other accolades to mention here, but including a Drama Desk and Obie Award. She is the founding director of the Consortium of Asian American Theaters and Artists and served as the president of its first board. She has acted extensively with NATCO, most recently in Henry VI, Shakespeare's trilogy in 2 parts, which was fabulous, by the way, as was her turn in NATCO's Awake and Sing. She has performed with many New York City-based companies, including LCT3, Soho Rep, New Group, and Mayi, and regionally with Yale Rep and Long Wharf and Berkeley Rep, as well as the Guthrie in Minnesota. Television credits include How to Get Away with Murder and Chicago PD. She has served on panels for the theater programs of the New York State Council on the Arts, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, among others. And in addition to her Barnard degree, she holds a master's from Columbia University. She is also, I would like to add, an awardee this year as Distinguished Alumna. And I urge you to go and listen to her acceptance speech and read more about her. Phanésia Pharel, class of 2020, is a Haitian American playwright who is currently focused on the divine metaphysical dilemma of Black and Latinx girlhood and experimenting creating content within the virtual reality space. Her play, And Other Dreams We Had, was a finalist for the City Theater National Short Playwriting Award and was selected for Smith and Krause Best Plays of 2020. She was a semifinalist for both the Blank Stage Future of Playwriting Award and in the Bay Area Playwrights Festival. During her time at Barnard, she won 4 literary prizes for her work, and she has developed several pieces with Conch Shell Productions and works as a teaching artist for Vibe Theater Experience. In 2020, she was artist in residence for New York Stage and Film and a National Young Playwright residency for the Echo Theater Company of Los Angeles. And she is currently under commission by Throne Stone Theater and is a brand newly minted alum, having just graduated a few weeks ago. Gabri Christa, our moderator, is currently an associate professor of professional practice in Barnard's dance department, where she teaches courses in screen dance, modern dance, composition, yoga, and a seminar in dance and film. She has published research on dance and film in several journals, including a piece about the making of her Another Building film series in The Scholar and Feminist Online. In her artistic life, she directed Fire Plus Fire, as well as performances by Burnt Sugar Dans that have been presented in venues including the United Nations, Lincoln Center, and Central Park's Summer Stage. As artistic director and curator of Snug Harbor Cultural Center, she developed and curated Performing Arts Salon Saturdays and initiated a young artist initiative, Young Matters. Gabri founded and curates a festival of the moving body on screen called Moving Body, Moving Image. And since 2015, she has served on the Cultural Advisory Commission for the City of New York. She is also a member of the New York Women and Television. And now I turn it over to Gabri. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for these introductions. I'm so honored to be here. I just want to say I'm coming to you from Manhattan, land of the Lenape people. And I'm just going to dive right in after we heard the introduction with some of the questions that I had come up with. And we'll probably talk about more things. But just first, welcome, and it's an honor to be with everyone. And just wanted to go around and ask you, how are you? How are you after this year, emotionally and spiritually? How are you navigating this and going into the next rounds? And I'm just going to start with Heather. And I'm just going around, yes.
I think that I am in this transitional period and feeling some anxiety as we're going from this time of being really, sheltered and inside and keeping ourselves safe to going back to the world and trying to figure out what that's going to look like as we move forward. And I feel that things are starting to pick up and expectations are starting to pick up. And it's a little challenging to navigate. How do we do this and continue to take care of ourselves, continue to remember that we are still dealing with the effects of a pandemic, as much as we all want to go back to doing what we did before, that if we jump right back into it and don't be mindful of that, there's a chance that we could not take care of ourselves the way that we need to. So I think I'm working on that right now.
Thank you. I'm just going to go by how my screen looks, which is different for everybody. So I want to ask the same thing for Mia. How are you?
Similarly, I have the same sorts of conflicting feelings. I mean, after more than a year of this, there's a certain sense of depletion, but also because things are picking up rather quickly, we've been so used to it was a challenge to slow down. And then once we get to this tempo of a little bit slower, then things are ramping up again. So the same sorts of anxieties. I feel like, oh my goodness, if we are not careful and we need to lock down again, I think I will lose my mind after this period of adjustment. So yeah, the conflict of depletion and energizing myself, I suppose. That's making some strange electric things in my body.
Me nodding a lot because it's so much to relate to. So thank you for that. Jean, would you like to tell us how you are?
Well, I think I have to endorse what everybody has said. A lot of anxiety and excitement, but La Femme had to postpone our production at the Signature in 2020, and we're still waiting to hear about our time slot. And there's just a lot up in the air, and not knowing is very not only confusing, but it's a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, thank you. Last but not least, Phanésia, you just also navigated being a student, have gone virtual, taking class, and then also being an artist. So how are you?
I'm okay. I feel very fortunate. I'm trying to count my blessings. I was able to complete my degree in the middle of the pandemic, and there's actually a lot of people who have had to drop out or postpone, or it's changed plans for a lot of people. So that doesn't mean I don't have the same anxiety or the same concern as other people, but I'm just honestly so happy that my family is still here, because a lot of people lost family during this pandemic. I had health challenges at the start of it, so I'm doing much better health wise, and I'm trying to count my blessings, but I also know that a lot of people are struggling, and so um, I'm trying to think of what we can do to support each other and be there for each other in this time, because it's like, when the pandemic happened, everyone went into fight or flight mode, and then you realize you run into someone, or as we're slowly transiting, you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot what happened to this person, or how are you, and these people that we may have dropped or lost or missed, like, just making sure that everybody's okay, because mental health is of serious concern. I mean, there's the COVID pandemic, and then there's the mental health pandemic that is partly fueled by COVID.
Thank you. Yes, it was I had a little glitch here with my button, but yeah, I think we see this around us, and it's definitely a time also of deep reflection, I think, for me personally. And it brings me sort of the other question I was really thinking about, which is, just to take sort of the positive side, right? When we talk about this period, and I shared this, I think, yesterday. My daughter said to my husband and myself, like, am I the only one who misses the beginning of the pandemic? And I really understood like her sentiment of the sort of safety and having to just be home, and I want to just focus a little bit on the positive sides. What are the positive aspects of this period? And what is one thing, or what are three things, if you have, that you learned and that you want to take with you? If there are, not want to assume that they are, but if there are. And I'm gonna, Phanésia, I'm gonna start with you.
Oh goodness. I like going last sometimes because I have time to think. I guess I'll just say a couple of the positives have been that I am a lot more grateful for things. I mean, oh my gosh, it's hard to complain about school when you miss being in school, It's hard to be like, I'm like, man, I wish I was, crunching these 3 papers with my friends like we used to, and eating french fries at 3 a.m. in the library. We can't do that anymore, So moments like that I found have made me a lot more appreciative of people, and I've been a lot more forthcoming about how much people mean to me. Like, I'm not as nervous or anxious to say like, hey, I really appreciate you and being here, or I really enjoyed this moment that we had together, because it a lot of people haven't lost people with COVID, but I know people who have. So not, and people pass away all the time from all different types of things. But, when a pandemic happens, you realize, oh my goodness, life is so short. I have to let people know that I appreciate them and that they're valued and that they're cared for. So that's been my good thing. And also a lot more artistic barriers have become accessible. So as a younger artist who's breaking in, what's really important to me is making relationships, learning from other people. But in the past, it would be hard because it's like I was working, I'm a student, I'm doing all these things. So I couldn't necessarily go to every coffee chat, do everything. But if everything is virtual, I may be able to listen in on a coffee chat, then go to a meeting. And I've been able to meet more people and actually take on more resources because of that and just learn more.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very eloquent. Also, what you talk about, really, right? Community, right? The sense of community, that you miss your community, studying with people, and also at the same time that the world opens up to you and more connection, with sort of connection in the arts. Yeah, thank you. Mia, how did you experience, and what are your positive things, if any?
Quite a lot of positive things, actually. The one thing that was, I mean, to a certain degree, time was such a challenge because negotiating is a whole different animal. What I mentioned before about everything having slowed down, but yeah, I had a production. I was in the middle of a show that got stopped. We didn't even know that Wednesday was our last performance, and NATCO was about to go into production, and so all of a sudden there was this time, and it allowed a different process to germinate in terms of, we can, instead of feeling ourselves pressured because of the way nonprofit theater works, where you have 3 weeks of rehearsal, then you have 3 days of tech where you're working 10 out of 12s, to actually appreciate the fact that we might be in a position to change this. And because it was a time of reflection, I think a lot of people started to have the time to actually try to make those changes possible, so that the time was actually a friend this time around. I got to spend the last year with my mother, who turned 91 in April, and we're very close. But I just realized that because we are both, she's a very independent, very active person. There are things that you take for granted, and when you all of a sudden have the time to appreciate this, this has been the most valuable time I've spent with her, and I'm very, very grateful for that. The feeling of community, feeling lots of people were reaching out to each other, and we were responding more readily, I think, in a way, even with the communities that we're regularly in touch with, we were responding more immediately and more generously, I think. People in my building where I live would check in. And I thought, another thing that I appreciated about this time is I can proudly wear the label of elder. People were, are you okay? Because I'm an older person. And they were like, we'll do your shopping for you. I had actors much, much younger than me saying, would you like me to take you on car runs? And I'll take care of you. I was just very, very touched and very moved by that. So there were actually a lot of positives. I got to work across the country, in ways that I couldn't before. I was luckily able to work with companies that I would never be able to, So I was working in Portland, in Arkansas, from the comfort of my living room. That's kind of pretty amazing, and just, yeah, I got to appreciate people and time and places.
Yeah, and so would you say that you, just as a follow-up question, because I'm really curious about what would you really take with you, like, beside the positives, like what is like the thing that that is so important to you that you don't want to lose that going forward?
Again, the time to be able to spend. I'm thinking specifically of we're in development for 2 new pieces. I don't want to rush ever again. I feel like I miss so much. I miss so much in terms of what people need. I miss being able to tell folks, the team that I'm working with, it's fine if this is something. Context, we've commissioned 5 playwrights, and each one of them is dealing with something specific personally and artistically. And, we created deadlines just because you should, but we were also, willing to say, okay, if it's a matter of you need 2 more months, that's fine. And because you have to pay attention to people's needs and not say, hurry up already, because that's what I need. It's more like what you need, and then I'll check in the next month, see where we are.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I'm just writing some things down that I'm hearing, right? We had community connections and more generosity, but also the time for process. So there's process. I hear process in it, right? More so than the end result. I mean, that's maybe my translation. More empathy, I guess, sometimes thinking about others and what they might need and not pressure them in time. Thank you.
Oh, well, boy, what Mia had to say was really right, was spot on. The time was amazing for me because we were rushing to cast Red Devil Battery Sign by Tennessee Williams that had never really been done successfully in this country with a 25-person cast. And we had just, I was still, in March of 2020, we were still interviewing actors for casting. And boy, that had to be shelved, obviously. And so one of the good things is that I made a decision to stay in New York, not to go to Florida where my mom lives and my sister. I'm from Virginia. I also made a decision not to go back to Virginia where I'm from. And I've always kind of been ambivalent about New York. I love it. And there's a part of me that hated it. During the pandemic, I fell in love with my city. I really did. And I've been here for a year and a half, no visits anywhere. And I think it really benefited me. And one of the things that people have mentioned is that the artistic barriers in my life were kind of dissolved. And I'd never experienced that before. And I loved it. So I felt very empowered. And I thought about what I could do if I stayed in New York. And I thought maybe we could do a benefit for the Actors Fund. And that's what we did. And I also thought, what's a role that I've always wanted to play? And it's Hannah in Night of the Iguana, which I, in a normal world, I never would get the rights to do in New York. And who's a director that I've always wanted to work with. And that is Emily Mann. And Emily Mann had just retired from the McCarter in June of last year. And I called Austin Pendleton, my mentor, and he said, I don't want to direct Night of the Iguana. I said, I don't want you to direct it. I want you to play Nano. I had never worked with Nano. I mean, never worked with Austin on stage. And even though it was virtually, it was such a treat. And so I emailed Emily Mann. She got back to me the next day, and we were able to put together, I think, a rather remarkable virtual presentation of Night of the Iguana. And Felicia Rashad played Maxine, Dylan McDermott played Shannon, and then Emily Mann, who's known for her multiple racial casting, she just put together an extraordinary cast. And I felt that it was really a 21st version of Night of the Iguana. And the response was extraordinary. It really was. And I credit that to Emily Mann. But so I don't think any of that would have happened without the pandemic. I mean, that's unfortunate in a certain way, because I also lost people during the pandemic, and I got COVID myself at Christmas time. It's a nasty affliction, and I have colleagues that got very, very sick from it. So, but I absolutely agree with some of our panelists that there were openings that I had never experienced before, and I found that thrilling.
Thank you. Yeah, so much of all of you, most of artists are just like sitting here nodding. What I can relate, I'm just not going to react to it, but thank you for that. I'm just going with Heather because there's so much that we can share, I'm sure. So Heather, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me was it kind of brought into focus all of the things that are the most important, and pushed out all the things that might be driving me or driving all of us all the time, but are not the core important things, like which is taking care of myself, taking care of my family, and staying connected with my loved ones, just as everyone else was saying, and that community. And I think that that's something that I'm really hoping to be able to take with me into whatever this new world is after this, is that being able to understand and prioritize the things that are really truly important, and be able to separate that from the noise of you should be doing this, you ought to be thinking of this, which is a challenge, and that's part of my anxiety, I think, as we go back. And then the other thing is what Mia was talking about, that compassion that I think was suddenly everywhere. And, it's like now it's important and understood that everyone will care for each other, for their needs, for that everybody has something going on for them right now that is difficult, and that we need to be compassionate. And I think that's not really any different than any other time. It's just that we all were feeling it at the same time. So I think I'm hoping that all of us are able to keep that with the deadlines and the expectations and the ability and the need to think about somebody as a whole person, and to think that things that are going on for them in their lives is just as important as whatever we're producing.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to skip some of the questions I had just because I'm looking at the time, and it's also important what you say. But I want to just talk about, sort of go back in what you said, but really think about how, if we look at New York, we're all New York, what are the changes that you would really want to see implemented in a more substantial way, right? So is it community agreements? It could be, and I'm thinking about a sort of a larger scale, that this is what I want the city of New York to do. This is what I like to see in the culture, but also how can you implement that, right? I know I'm giving an example in my classes. I started really with implementing a community agreement with my students. What is important? What is our agreement? What space are we creating in everything I do? And I did that before in my artistic work, but with the students in every space, we're going to listen, we're going to value. And that's been helpful, sort of as a reminder, this is what we're doing, right? And that's on a sort of more personal, interpersonal level. But if you can think about either interpersonal or personal, but also citywide, the arts have suffered, right? We've all lost work, even though there were opportunities. What would you envision, if you can? And you can just jump in at this point if you have an idea. So I'm gonna just open it up. If not, I'll tag you. You want to go, Mia? You look like you want to say something, but not really.
No, it's a lot to contemplate, because there were so many things happening this past year that, I mean, necessarily for me, I had to react to. I mean, I remember feeling, when George Floyd was murdered, completely helpless, and I I wanted to do something and I didn't know what to do, and I thought that the only way I can react or contribute something is through the theater. And it was actually, it was the inspiration to do these commissions that I was talking about. And it was fascinating to me that people were very receptive to something like that. And so I wonder if it's not, if that's something that can carry through as just a kind of universal value, that people are receptive to ideas that respond, because of course the other big thing that I responded to was the anti-Asian violence, and so I responded to that in a particular way also. And what I did was to kind of flood the internet with Asian American faces. I just figured it was the most positive way to react. So it started to influence what I wanted to present. So we did an Our Town with an all Asian American cast with 27 people without doubling parts, just to pitch the idea that maybe this is a way for us to rethink the way we see our communities and our towns. And then at the same time, the next thing up for us, which is it's opening on Monday, y'all. And it just, I think because the universe was responding to this particular need. So we have the U.S. Premiere of a new Carol Churchill play, who is allowing an all Asian American cast to do this. So these are positive responses. So I feel as if we need to, New York, if we refine our radar and our response to what's happening in terms of the problematic things that need a lot of attention and healing, that's a big ask, but that would be something that might contribute to vital change, not just the one-off thing, which is something that I've always been sensitive to. It's like, you have your Asian American slot, so you feel good about yourself, and then but to actually effect change for long lasting, to a certain degree, I had audience for that during the past year because of what we've all spoken about, attention and time. So it would be terrific if that was the one thing that carried through.
Yeah, wonderful. It sort of also brings me to the other thing, like how can we have sustainable change, like real change, systematic change. And you speak to that in about time, and also figuring out all the things that we like, all of you like, how can we implement that? How can we hold on to certain values that we've discovered that we do like? So that, I think that's powerful. And also, of course, the racial equity, everything that we talk about, so that it's not sort of a performance of alliance, but a real change, and how to do that in a world that's been, also as women, not been equitable. So yeah, thank you for that, the thinking about it. Who wants to go next? Yes, Heather, go ahead.
I think that one of the things that the pandemic has done for us, and that we need to run with and expand on, is that it's allowed us to reimagine the arts and how it gets created, what it looks like, and how it gets accessed. And I think all of those things, not just learning exactly how we did it during the pandemic, but letting that inspire us to continue to reimagine this. Like, it does not have to be done the same way it's always been done. It does not have to be cast the same way it's always been cast. And it does not have to be accessed in the same way that it's always been accessed. And I think for me, working with a lot of families who typically do not have as much access to the arts, that's such an important thing that we continue to figure out how to expand. It's not about being able to pay a high price for a ticket, and that's the only way that you can access the arts, that there's so many other creative ways that we can do things. And it's giving us the permission and the inspiration to keep on doing that, to remove barriers. And, you know, it doesn't have to look the same either. Like Mia was saying, that we need to really continue to do work to, you know, there's not a ballet, it doesn't need to be a ballet body. Why do we have these rules? And we can break the rules. We broke the rules in order to make art during this time. So let's keep breaking the rules.
Yeah, wonderful. Phanésia, I see that you're nodding, so, or snapping.
Yeah, I wish we were together in person so I could just be like, yes, or like audibly, you know, agree. But I absolutely agree that we need to consider different ways of breaking the rules, and how can we let more people into the room to create art? How can we create more pathways? I think that was something that was really cool, as I noticed a lot more of my friends or people that I love just saying, okay, well, you know, I know for me as a playwright, I usually apply to anywhere between 20 to 50 opportunities a year. Like I started my first year of college, I applied to like 20. This year, last year I applied to over 50. And this year it's been really hard because so many organizations have been like, we have to close, we have to close our submission. We're still handling the pre-COVID people, or our writers group is closed, or our fund is closed. And so people have popped up with their own. And the truth is, it's much easier to create something new as opposed to change a long-standing system of inequity, right? I don't know if, for example, for me in the theater, off-Broadway, part of what I love about off-Broadway is that it's its own thing, and so much is possible. And there's certain things that I think you can't really get on Broadway that you get off Broadway. And so I think that we need to just keep creating new lanes and pathways on our own, and we need to stop asking people for permission, particularly women, because we need to own our stuff. And we purchase actually in theater, women purchase theater tickets more than anyone, but we're produced the least, we're paid the least, and we have the power to change that.
Here to all of that. Yes, absolutely. And I can't agree more with what you were saying, and all of you saying also, Heather. And I'm just looking at the time, and I see that it is getting to the time that we open the Q&A, but I think we can, the questions that I see are related to what we're talking about envisioning. And I have a whole long list of things that I might want to bring up, but let's first go to some of the questions. And this is, do you all think that virtual performances are here to stay? Or that a virtual performance is here to stay? And who wants to do that? And I'm going to say, I'm not sure if you're talking, Jean, because you're off, you're muted. Do you want to take this?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. They're here to stay. The great Emily Mann, when we were doing a talk back after one of our last streaming in March, she said that the virtual world has opened up this whole visual aspect to performing that she wasn't really quite familiar with or comfortable with. And she and Felicia were talking about doing Night of the Iguana in Mexico on a cliff somewhere and filming it. And she said that streaming and virtual, the close-ups that she was able to take advantage of, because she edited our presentation, she said that really made her appreciate film. And she said she would definitely do another virtual presentation. And obviously, because it's virtual, as our panelists have mentioned, it just really opens up you to the world. And La Femme, we had a national audience for Night of the Iguana. And also as an artist, you can just participate, as Mia said, in so many other projects in the world. And actually in Night of the Iguana, we had somebody streaming from Mexico. an artist, an actor playing one of our characters, and the two German characters were in Vienna. So yes, I think the virtual world is absolutely here to stay. And as an actress, it is a whole different animal. It really is. It's certainly not stage, and it's not film. And I haven't done that much TV, but I have heard from colleagues of mine that it's not like TV either. It's just its own animal, but there's something that's really exciting about it. And so, yes, I look forward to doing another virtual production.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, and the one thing we are not saying, but is implied, it also creates, for people who have internet access, let's be real, it creates more equity.
That's true.
Yeah, internet access, because that's an equity idea. Yeah, and I can attend, we did our festival and had 11,000 viewers in 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah, no, absolutely astonishing. And part of it was the topic and the timing. But I know for myself that we're doing the next one, it would be both, because the equity part of it was really important. And I also for myself is that when performances are not just at that time, but maybe you can watch it later. And yeah. I'm sure we'll figure out a lot of really interesting things around this, right? So yeah, that's beautiful. I'm gonna go to the next one. This was a question for Heather. Do you see your company's role as having changed due to the pandemic? Let's say like as having changed due to the pandemic's impact in your and your students' neighborhood?
So I wouldn't say that it changed, because I think that part of our mission and part of the work that we do has always been more holistic than a typical dance program, that we've always seen our role to be more supportive in other aspects of the child and family's life. And I do think that that part of it became extremely important during the pandemic. We, of course, wanted to make sure that we could keep the kids in class virtually, but we also were very, very concerned about what was going on with their families throughout this time. So we did phone calls home and texts and everything, and asked, how are you? What do you need aside from, do you have internet? Can you connect to our classes? But also, what else are you struggling with, and how can we help you? And thankfully, we have really strong relationships and partners in the neighborhood, not only with our families, but with other organizations. So we were able to connect them with services that they needed. We were able to get people who were experiencing real food insecurity connected with food deliveries, and help with their landlord situations. People had some housing issues, and I don't see those things as being separate from the work that we do, because I think you can't be in dance class and you can't focus on your art if you have all of these extreme things going on in your life. So I always have seen that as part of it, but I'm really grateful that we had been doing that work and had been forming those relationships with the families so that we could support them in that way. And I do think that it will help us as we go forward to say, this is a really important part of what we do. Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's really important.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. So I'm going to go sort of to a question I see here. How has the pandemic affected attitudes towards age, especially advanced age, in both participants and audience, or has it?
Well, I've been working on this project for quite some time now, concentrating on, I used to call it aging successfully in the theater. Now I'd like to call it the next phase, so we don't have age at all anywhere to predispose people to what that is. In terms of the pandemic, I'm not sure, because this project that we're developing, we've asked 5 playwrights to write monologues that are half an hour at least, and the characters have to be 60 years old or older. And the actors who portray them have to be 60 years old or older. So the one thing we started to think about was, well, how do we deal with if the character, if the actor has some, requirements, some needs, how do we pay attention to that? And the director, Les Waters, said, we give them what they want. If they need to be prompted, that becomes part of the performance. If they need physical help getting from the wings to their position, that becomes part of the performance. So, incorporating all of that into the theater, the theater piece itself. I don't know that the pandemic has yes, it has. It's kind of focused it a little bit, because the one thing that I keep thinking about that is thematic in the pandemic is breath. And so I always feel that as actors, we're always thinking, about our breath, whether or not vocal production or just physically. So that kind of focused it a little bit in terms of, not just for me, but I think what the playwrights were writing about. And we have a gamut of playwrights in terms of age range. So maybe that was in tandem. Maybe it was just the pandemic kind of honing our thinking about age. It's something that's been preoccupying me for some time. So, in a good way.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. And I'm going to ask you permission to follow up with you after this panel on this. The festival was on the aging, moving body. And so there's a lot, and I'm doing guest editing and scholar and feminist on this. So is it okay if I email
Absolutely, would be my pleasure.
I'm just really interested in this topic, besides all the other topics. But another question we have, how we have a few, I skipped one. In your respective creative work, do you encourage your participants to advocate for how the arts enriches their lives and share it with family and other groups they are involved with? I know, Heather, you already answered that, right? So, but maybe if any of you can take this, but I want to say that I think we always advocate as artists, speaking for all of us. Aren't we always advocating for how important the arts are? Because it's not underfunded, right? Or is there anything more specific that you more intentionally do right now? Do you think?
Speaking from my perspective, working with kids, I think that during this pandemic, there's been so much talk about academics and like the slide and like losing. So a lot of the kids' schools have put extra work on them. So they're doing Saturday school, they're doing like extra long hours. And a lot of our parents really put a lot of importance on academics. And so they're hearing from their teachers and principals that their kids need to be working extra hard in order to keep their grades up and not lose what they're learning. And so I have felt like I really needed to advocate to parents that this is something that's also very important for your child. It's going to help their academics. It's really difficult to get that message across when you're hearing a lot of authority figures say they need to be working on their math and their reading. And of course those things are important and academics are very important, but it's so easy for the importance of the arts and arts education to get lost in all of that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to another question, which is, or is this the resending? No, this was a resending the question, the same question. I said it, I just skipped it, and then I went to another question on purpose, actually. I think that's the questions I see, so I want to jump in. And see if anyone has anything specific to talk about And I want to just continue a little bit with some of the other questions, or do you have something you want to add to this, Phanésia? Or Phanésia?
In terms of advocating for the arts or the topic in general?
The topic in general, and I'll give some more specific questions. Maybe what you could take is, how will you, in light of this moment of racial reckoning, make systematic change in your field specifically?
That's such an interesting question. So after George Floyd was murdered, there was a reckoning in many industries, but particularly in theater, there was a We See White American Theater coalition, and many artists signed it, and there were lists of demands. Many theater companies, artistic directors have stepped down in the coming months, or people have transitioned out of their position, or people have come forward with particular programs. And one of the things that, in my opinion, I'm not saying this is fact, or I'm not saying what I believe is fact, but the element of class and race, they typically intersect a lot, especially for artists. And one of the main things that a lot of actors and creators that I spoke to is, we need to talk about the money. We need to talk about the money. Let's talk about the money. If we really want to talk about it, I'm not going to say who, but a really great writer director that I work with, and someone hinted at this earlier. It was me, actually. You get the white theater company, right, gets the big grant to bring artists of color, uses it for a small slot, and then where the rest of that money go, right? So a lot of this, I don't believe in taking on the weight of the world's problems on my own back. I think that's incredibly unfair, and too many Black women feel the need to do everything for everyone. I'm going to focus on telling the stories that matter to me, that I know are going to make an impact on people's lives. But the inequity within the theater, if you ask me about it, I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you what I know. But I think that if we're talking about race, we should also talk about money, because those lines go hand in hand, and we should talk about who gets to decide where the money goes. And August Wilson wrote about this years ago, way before I was born, about how it's unfair that that theaters of color, it goes back to the ownership piece that I mentioned before. Theaters of color have been squashed out, and people end up taking their ownership, right? And the viewership of and it's the same thing in Hollywood. The ownership of Black audiences, Latinx audiences, Asian audiences, that money goes to the main theater, but that theater isn't actually supporting those artists of color, those producers of color, those directors of color. We've got a problem. And so I think that they go hand in hand, and particularly we need to talk about ownership. And I think that what I do is that I support and promote, like, Conch Shell Productions is in my bio for a reason, because it's run by an incredible Caribbean woman she's doing everything. I mean, she's amazing. And, I'm always promoting her. And I'm not the type to just, get really only promote like predominantly white theaters in my bio and say, I got the validation from white people and that's, that's it. No, I'm going to promote everybody and all of the people along the way and put my money particularly in those organizations. But as an artist, I'm only one step. The audience has to also support theaters of color because they're out there and they need funding. There are artists of color that need funding. Issa Rae wouldn't have been Issa Rae if all those people didn't support her Kickstarter. So what we got to do is money talks. So sorry, that was a rant, but you asked.
No, I want to know this because we can't be just like going up around it the whole time either, right? That's why I asked the question. It's not just like the performing alliance, what I would say, like, right? What are the actual steps? How, and I'm not asking you to change it, but what can you demand, whether it's pay or whether it is when your play is going to be produced with a major company, what are your rights? How do you own your own work? How do you produce your own work? Who are your friends? And who owns the money? Who gets the money? And but how would that look like? Or what are the those are really good. Yeah, you wanted to say something about that?
Yeah, money. It's a capitalist society. I don't think we can get away from it. All of the dreams that the wishes that we were talking about in terms of how would you want to fundamentally change something. When I spoke about taking time, that means money. We're advocating, because as part of the We See You What movement, there has been change that we've been advocating for, just in terms of the work week, for instance. We're asking that the work week is only Monday through Friday. We're asking to do away with 10 out of 12s, because that's ridiculous, because actually between hours 9 and 12 you're useless anyway. So for producers, this means either adding on weeks, which means more money, or you're extending your time per project, which means you have less projects per season. So they're having to negotiate all of these things. But I think they should. Maybe that'll get us closer to socialized arts. I'm dreaming. But yeah, money is always the thing.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and I think you want a little thing to wrap up, because I think we have about 2 more minutes left. What do you think about this idea of just artists in general getting sort of a living wage? Specifically artists. This is being discussed right now, full disclosure. What would that do for you as a maker? Last question. Socialist, of course, for some people. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just would like to address what Mia was talking about. And that's to me, was one of the advantages of the pandemic, is that when we went virtually, a lot of costs were relieved and we could focus on paying the performers. Yes, we had, I guess we would say, a virtual set, but certainly nowhere near what a production would cost on stage. And so we were able to really, I think, give the actors a respectable stipend. That was very, very important. Excuse me. And I also think I would also like to address what you asked about. You asked about the age issue. And I just think it's super important to not focus on that, and to allow any person to audition for a role that they think they're appropriate for, whatever their age, their color, whatever. If they've got a feel for the role, I believe they need to be given an audition, and that's what La Femme tries to do. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Yeah, I lose my voice.
No, that is. I want to say thank you. I think I see Rona come, so we're going to have to stop. And yes, but then we need to open the doors, right? People need to be welcome, because we all know people just don't show up if there never has been space for you. That has to be created. And a person, yeah. So we know that. I just want to make sure we say that. It's been amazing to talk to all of you. Apologies, I just saw that for some people my voice is not well. I'm not in my normal home, so hopefully you can hear or get a transcript. Thank you, Heather, Mia, Jean, and Phanésia. I'm very curious to read more. Thank you, Rona and Angela, for inviting me, and it's such a pleasure to get to know you through this 2 short moments, but and know a little bit more about your work.
And just so everyone knows, we put the links to all of our panelists' companies in the chat. So please support the arts. The arts are one of the hardest hit industries in this pandemic, which is really where this panel came out of. In addition to, as has been discussed, it was a game changer. And there were both incredible negatives, but incredible positives as well in the industry. So I want to thank all of our participants. Thank you so much, everyone who came out today. It's the last day of reunion. We still have a few more events. I hope we'll see you all at the closing events, and keep going to the theater, keep going to see dance, and we will hopefully see you all very soon in person. All right. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.